Ladies and gentlemen, picture a dusty little town on the edge of the frontier, where the air is thick with tension. The saloon doors never stop swinging, and one wrong word can set the whole place ablaze. Now imagine the moment when order snaps, when laughter turns to shouts, and the streets explode into chaos. That's not just a story about the Wild West. That's a mirror of life itself, a riot of challenges that tests who we are and what we're made of. The frontier setting of a small western town like Bucksnort is more than just a background for gunfights, saloons, and lawmen. It is a stage where the rawest elements of human nature clash against the unforgiving wilderness. Imagine a dusty road cutting through the heart of the settlement, lined with crooked wooden buildings, each one built with hurried hands and the determination of settlers who refuse to be beaten by the harsh land. The sun beats down relentlessly, turning the ground into cracked earth and forcing every drop of sweat to sting as it rolls into a man's eyes. The town itself seems alive, breathing with the unease of gamblers, drifters, and hard-working folk who all know that order in this place is fragile, balanced on a thin line that could snap at the smallest provocation. In such a world, law is not written in neat codes or enforced by steady courts. It is often carried in the holsters of men, in the grit of their fists, and in the sharp stares exchanged across saloon tables. Every town like Bucksnort carries its own tension, an invisible storm cloud hovering over its rooftops. One moment, the streets may appear calm, filled with laughter, the piano in the saloon rattling out a tune, and the blacksmith hammering iron into shape. Yet beneath that surface hums an energy, as volatile as gunpowder. All it takes is one insult thrown at the wrong man, one card drawn from the wrong deck, or one whiskey too many to ignite the fuse. These frontier towns are melting pots of people with clashing dreams. Some are fortune seekers, chasing gold or cattle money. Others are wanderers trying to carve a name out of the wilderness, while many are simply survivors clinging to whatever life they can scrape from the dust. That mixture creates friction, and friction, in a place without solid authority, often burns into violence. Bucksnort, like many such towns, thrives on contradiction. It is both a promise and a threat. It promises opportunity, land to settle, money to be made, reputations to forge. But it threatens destruction at every turn. Outlaws lurking on the edges, rival factions brewing in the saloons, and disputes that rarely end with words alone. The streets are not patrolled by dependable officers, but rather watched by wary eyes, each man and woman aware that survival depends on their own readiness to defend what is theirs. In this atmosphere, the concept of justice becomes slippery. To one man, justice means protecting his cattle herd at any cost. To another, it means winning at cards without accusation. To yet another, it means surviving the day with his pride unbroken. When all of these versions of justice meet in the same space, the result is rarely calm. The western frontier has a way of magnifying personalities. A quiet man in the city may remain unnoticed, but in a town like Bucksnort, his silence could be mistaken for menace, or his strength for dominance. A loud braggart in the saloon may find his boasting answered by fists or pistols, because here, words carry heavier weight. The frontier tests character with relentless pressure, forcing hidden traits to rise to the surface. Cowards are exposed quickly, their fear showing when steel is drawn. The brave or reckless become legends, their names carried from town to town. The frontier setting does not allow for masks to stay on long. It strips a person down to their truest self in front of the entire town. The roughness of Bucksnort is not only in its people, but also in the very air that surrounds them. Dust storms roll in, blinding sight and choking lungs, reminding everyone that nature itself is an adversary as fierce as any gunfighter. The nights bring cold winds that slice through cabins, and the mornings break with the howl of coyotes echoing across the plains. Survival is not a given, and that urgency creates a rhythm to life. Every day is a gamble, every night a victory, and the thin walls of the town cannot keep out the awareness that the wilderness waits just beyond, ready to reclaim its ground at the first sign of weakness. Bucksnort, like the archetypal frontier town, is a reflection of a world where civilization is still learning to walk, where the rules are made and unmade in the span of an evening, and where power often belongs to the boldest rather than the most just. This is why the setting matters so deeply to the story of riots, clashes, and wild upheavals. Without the backdrop of a place so precariously balanced, the eruption of chaos would lose its meaning. The town itself is a powder keg built from human ambition, rugged independence, and constant trial against nature. The riot is not just an accident, but an inevitable flare, up in a land where tension is always simmering, just beneath the surface, waiting for the spark. Pike Bearfield is more than a name in a Western tale. He is the living embodiment of strength forged in hardship, a figure who stands tall when others buckle under the weight of chaos. In a world where order is fragile and justice uncertain, a man like him becomes a symbol, not because he chooses to be, but because the circumstances of life demand it. His very presence in a volatile town like Bucksnort represents something deeper than brute force. It is the stubborn resilience of a human spirit that refuses to be cowed. He is not carved from polish or refinement, but from the raw grain of the frontier, where a man's worth is measured not by titles or wealth, but by the strength of his will and the breadth of his courage. When he walks into a room, the energy shifts. Not because he speaks loudest or boasts about what he can do, but because he radiates the quiet certainty of a man who has seen trouble and lived through it. His size and strength are undeniable, yet what makes him truly formidable is his readiness to act without hesitation when chaos rises. He is the kind of figure who can throw himself into a riot, not merely to break bones or prove dominance, but because he recognizes that in disorder, someone must hold the line. In a place where fear can paralyze whole crowds, Pike Bearfield becomes the steady anchor, a man who shows through action that standing firm is possible even when the world falls into madness. Strength in his case is not a mere matter of muscle or might. It is also endurance, the ability to face ridicule, danger, or overwhelming numbers without faltering. The frontier life teaches every man to defend himself, but few possess the endurance to keep standing after the dust has settled, when the bruises throb and the aches set in. Pike Bearfield embodies this endurance, showing that true strength is not in the first blow struck, but in the last one survived. His resilience is not reckless bravado, but the hardened lesson that survival demands stubbornness, and stubbornness, when guided by courage, becomes an unshakable shield. Yet his strength is also inseparable from humor, from the larger than life attitude that carries him through moments others would find unbearable. Laughter in the middle of chaos may seem strange, but for men like him, humor is not frivolous. It is a weapon against despair. When fists fly and chairs splinter, when the air is thick with tension, Pike Bearfield's laughter and booming voice cut through, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, life is to be faced with spirit, not fear. That blend of brawn and wit is what makes him unforgettable. For it transforms his fights into more than violence. They become performances of defiance, demonstrations of a spirit too big to be crushed. In the Riot of Bucksnort, he is not just another fighter. He is the storm within the storm. While others panic or scatter, he stands in the thick of the whirlwind, facing chaos head-on. It is not that he is unafraid. Fear belongs to every man. But rather that his strength allows him to master fear, to channel it into action rather than paralysis. That mastery is what turns an ordinary man into a figure others look to when their own courage wavers. People may laugh at his rough edges, his brashness, his wild way of handling problems. But deep down they recognize that he carries the kind of strength most wish they had. The frontier is a cruel teacher, and Pike Bearfield is its graduate. His strength is not the softness of inherited power or the luxury of privilege. It is the raw product of survival, of battles fought against both man and nature. Every scar on his body, every bruise he shrugs off, tells the story of a man who has met hardship face to face and refused to yield. And this refusal is what makes him symbolic. He shows that in a world where chaos can rise without warning, where law can be twisted or absent altogether, a man of courage can still hold ground. His name becomes a reminder that strength is not found in avoidance but in engagement, not in retreat but in defiance. To the onlookers of Bucksnort, Pike Bearfield may seem like a roughneck, a man of fists and fury, but to those who look deeper, he is the living image of resilience. He represents the idea that when life itself becomes a riot, when disorder threatens to swallow everything, someone must rise who does not flinch, who does not give in, who becomes a wall against the tide. In him, strength is not only a personal trait, but a public symbol, a beacon that others can rally behind when they find themselves lost in the chaos of the frontier. The riot is never just noise and broken furniture. It is the sudden tearing open of all the hidden tensions that have been building under the surface. In a town like Bucksnort, where pride is sharp and patience is thin, every argument, every sideways glance, and every grudge is like kindling stacked high in the corner of a room. The riot comes as the spark that finally sets it ablaze. It does not arrive politely or with warning, but explodes in the midst of laughter, whiskey, and the thump of boots on saloon floors. One insult too many, one shove across a table, and suddenly the entire town is swept into chaos. What had been a night of drinking and gambling transforms into a battlefield of fists, chairs, and flying bottles, with every man deciding in that instant whether to fight, flee, or freeze. A riot is a turning point because it reveals truths that no ordinary day can show. In calm times, people can hide their nature behind civility or caution, but when the town erupts, the masks come off. The man who boasted loudly at the poker table may cower under it when the first punch lands. The quiet figure in the corner may leap into the fray with a ferocity no one expected. Friends may find themselves suddenly at odds, while bitter rivals may stand shoulder to shoulder for survival. The chaos acts like a forge, burning away pretenses and leaving only the core of who a person really is. In that sense, the riot is not merely destruction but revelation, a moment when character is stripped bare for all to see. For a figure like Pike Bearfield, the riot becomes a stage on which his true nature is tested. It is not just another brawl, but a crucible where strength, humor, and courage come together in plain view. While others scatter, he charges headlong into the storm, becoming both participant and anchor in the madness. His role is not to prevent the riot, but to survive it, and in surviving it, to show that endurance has value greater than panic. The very fact that he does not retreat marks him as different. Where most men's first thought is self-preservation, his instinct is to stand firm, to fight through the chaos rather than around it. That instinct transforms the riot into his proving ground. The moment when his larger than life resilience is not just told but witnessed. The turning point of the riot lies not only in its physical violence, but also in its aftermath. A town does not remain the same after such an eruption. Once the chairs are broken, the windows shattered, and the dust settled, people remember who stood tall and who hid. They remember who cracked jokes in the middle of the melee and who betrayed their neighbors for safety. Reputations are rewritten in the space of those few wild minutes. A man who showed cowardice may carry that stain for years, while another who showed courage may find doors open to him that were once closed. The riot does not just break furniture. It reshapes the very social fabric of the town. There is also an irony in the way riots turn disorder into strange unity. In the midst of chaos, when fists are flying and bottles are smashing, there is a strange equality that emerges. It no longer matters if a man is rich or poor, gambler or rancher, stranger or native son. In that moment, every man is caught in the same whirlwind. The riot forces them into a common experience, however brutal, and that shared survival leaves a mark. It is both destructive and unifying, tearing the town apart while binding its people with memories they will never forget. Each scar, each bruise, each laugh over the madness the next day becomes part of the collective story. For Bucksnort, the riot becomes a symbol of the frontier itself. Life on the edge of civilization is never stable, always teetering between order and collapse. Just as the town struggles to hold itself together against the wilderness, so too do its people struggle to hold order against the chaos within themselves. The riot embodies that struggle, a visible eruption of all the invisible battles simmering beneath the surface. It reminds everyone that no matter how civilized they try to appear, they are still living in a place where survival and pride often matter more than law. The riot as a turning point is powerful because it cannot be ignored. A quiet dispute can fade, a private grudge can be forgotten, but a full-blown town-wide brawl leaves its mark etched into memory. The broken windows may be replaced, the blood may be scrubbed from the floorboards, but the memory of who fought, who laughed, and who ran lingers long afterward. That memory shapes not only how individuals are seen, but how the town sees itself. Bucksnort after the riot is not the same Bucksnort it was before. It carries the scar of its eruption, and within that scar lies the lesson that chaos is never far away, and that in the face of it, true character will always be revealed. In the middle of violence, there is often an unexpected thread of humor, and in a place like Bucksnort, that humor is not simply comic relief, but a survival instinct. When fists fly and tempers flare, laughter can seem out of place, yet it is precisely in that contrast that it gains its power. People on the frontier learned quickly that life was too harsh to take every wound, every insult, every brawl with solemn weight. The riot in Bucksnort carries with it not just the sting of broken glass and the crash of bodies through doors, but also the absurdity of men tripping over barrels, swinging at the wrong target, or shouting threats that sound more ridiculous than terrifying. This blend of violence and wit makes the chaos human, a reminder that even when people are locked in struggle, they are still capable of laughing at themselves and each other. Humor in such a setting becomes a weapon against despair. The frontier offered little softness, droughts ruined crops. Outlaws robbed without mercy. Nature punished mistakes with brutal swiftness. If a man could not laugh, he could not endure. In a riot, when fear and fury might overwhelm the senses, a sharp quip or exaggerated gesture can break the tension, making the unbearable suddenly survivable. Pike Bearfield himself embodies this quality, turning even the act of being struck or knocked down into a story worth retelling. His resilience is not only in his fists, but in his ability to treat a fight as theater, to laugh loudly in the middle of blows, and to remind those around him that losing one's spirit is worse than losing a fight. The humor of such moments is not polished or delicate. It is rough, raw, and often ridiculous, born from the absurdity of human behavior under stress. A man who enters the saloon, intending to prove his toughness, may find himself tossed into a horse trough, sputtering with water dripping from his hat while the crowd roars with laughter. Another, swinging wildly, may accidentally knock his own ally senseless, a moment both painful and comic. These flashes of irony turn the riot into more than senseless brutality. They transform it into a living tale that will be retold with grins and chuckles long after the bruises have faded. In this way, humor becomes the glue that holds the memory of chaos together, softening its edges without erasing its lessons. Humanity shines most clearly in these contradictions. Violence strips away civility, but laughter restores a spark of connection between people who might otherwise remain divided. In the middle of a riot, enemies and rivals can find themselves laughing at the same absurd spectacle, even as they trade blows. That shared laughter, even fleeting, is a reminder that beneath the anger and pride, everyone is bound by the same human need to find joy, however brief, in the roughness of life. It is a reminder that the people of Bucksnort, no matter how fierce or reckless, are not merely destroyers but storytellers, shaping their chaos into something more than destruction. The presence of humor also highlights the resilience of those who endure the riot. It takes strength to fight, but it takes greater spirit to emerge from violence with a story to tell and a smile to share. Without that spirit, the frontier would break men quickly, reducing them to bitterness. With it, however, even the harshest moments become threads in a tapestry of survival and identity. The riot is not remembered solely for the damage done, but for the tales that grow from it. The exaggerated versions told around campfires, the playful boasts in saloons, the knowing smirks exchanged between those who lived through it. It is this strange balance between violence and humor that makes the riot feel alive. Too much weight on the violence, and it becomes a tale of misery. Too much emphasis on the comedy, and it loses its grit. Together they create a portrait of frontier life that is both savage and strangely joyful, a paradox that reflects the human condition itself. People in Bucksnort fight because pride demands it, but they laugh because laughter is the only way to rise above the madness. And in that laughter lies their humanity, the unspoken bond that carries them forward into the next day, bruised but unbroken, scarred but still smiling. When a riot crashes through a place like Bucksnort, it is not only a spectacle of noise and flying fists, it is also a lesson carved into the minds of everyone who witnesses it. The lesson is simple yet difficult to live by. In moments of disorder, a person must decide whether to bend, break, or stand firm. A man's courage is not measured in how he carries himself when the town is calm and the saloon is full of laughter. but in how he responds when chaos swallows the streets and fear runs through the crowd like wildfire. Standing firm does not always mean being the strongest fighter, nor does it mean never stumbling. It means refusing to surrender one's ground, one's principles, and one's dignity when the world seems to be unraveling all around. The frontier was never a forgiving place. There were no thick walls of law or systems of order to protect people from the unexpected. Instead, every person was constantly tested by storms, hunger enemies, and the sharp edge of fortune. In such a world, moments of disorder were inevitable. A poker game could turn into a brawl, a misunderstanding into a gunfight, a night of revelry into destruction. It was in those moments that true leadership and resilience emerged. Some men ran for cover, others sank into fear, but a rare few stood their ground and refused to be swept away. These few were not always flawless or noble, but they carried within them a grit that the rest of the town could lean on. To stand firm in chaos is to become a pillar for others, whether one chooses to or not. The crowd looks to the one who does not flinch, who steps forward when others step back. Pike Bearfield, for example, embodied this instinct. While others may have ducked beneath tables or tried to sneak out the back door, he planted himself in the middle of the storm, swinging, laughing, and refusing to let the riot defeat his spirit. His strength was not simply physical, but symbolic. By remaining unshaken, he gave courage to those around him, showing them that disorder did not have to mean defeat. In this way, one person's courage has the power to multiply, spreading like fire in dry grass, lifting others out of fear. The lesson of standing firm also speaks to the nature of honor. On the frontier, a man's word and his reputation were often all he had. Losing face in front of the town could wound him more deeply than any punch or bullet. The riot tested not only bodies but reputations. To run away or to betray one's companions in the heat of chaos was to brand oneself with cowardice, a mark that no amount of excuses could erase. To remain steady, even while bloodied and bruised, was to show that pride and dignity meant more than temporary safety. Standing firm became a declaration that one's honor was worth protecting, even in the midst of madness. Leadership, too, is born in these moments. The frontier did not hand out titles easily, and men did not follow others simply because they wore badges or claimed authority. They followed those who proved themselves under fire, those who showed courage when courage was needed most. The riot in Bucksnort was a moment when such leaders were revealed. Not every man who stood firm became a hero, but those who faltered could never again claim the respect of their neighbors. The chaos sorted the true from the false, creating a hierarchy of respect built not on wealth or words, but on action. The importance of grit in these moments cannot be overstated. Grit is the ability to hold on when everything tells you to let go, to stay rooted even as the tide of disorder tries to drag you under. Without grit, strength fades quickly, and fear takes over. With grit, even the smallest man can become unmovable. The riot showed that grit mattered as much as muscle, that stubbornness and resolve could turn the tide as surely as fists and weapons. The men who possessed this quality became anchors in the chaos, reminding everyone else that giving up was not the only choice. In a larger sense, the Riot of Bucksnort reflected the struggles of life itself. Every person faces storms, maybe not with fists and flying chairs, but with hardships, losses, and trials that feel just as wild and destructive. The lesson carries forward when disorder comes. The only way through is to stand firm. To lose control is easy, to run away is tempting. But to plant your feet, to take the blows, and to refuse to surrender. This is what builds character and shapes destiny. The frontier, with all its harshness, made this lesson clear in every riot, every fight, every test of survival. And it is a lesson that outlives the riot itself, carried in the memory of those who saw it, lived it, and chose to stand tall when everything around them fell into chaos. The Western has always been more than a tale of gunfights, dusty towns, and rough characters. It is a mirror of life itself, reflecting struggles that are universal to every human being. A town like Bucksnort may seem like a relic of a bygone era, but its riot is a symbol of the challenges each of us faces when life spins out of control. The saloons, the poker games, the sudden outbursts of violence. These are not just entertainment. They stand in for the unpredictability of existence, where peace can shatter in an instant, and where survival depends on courage, grit, and the choices we make under pressure. The Western uses the drama of the frontier to teach truths about endurance, identity, and the fight to carve meaning out of chaos. The frontier is harsh, filled with extremes of weather, isolation, and danger, much like the ups and downs of life itself. People in those towns lived day to day never knowing if fortune would smile or disaster would strike. In the same way, read modern life throws its storms at us, without warning: financial struggles, betrayals, illnesses, sudden changes that overturn everything we thought was secure. Just as Bucksnort balanced on the edge of order and collapse, so too do we balance on the edge of stability and upheaval. The riot in a Western becomes a symbol of those upheavals, dramatized through flying fists and broken windows. Yet carrying the same truth: disorder will come, and how we respond will define us. The figures who rise in these stories are not flawless saints but rough, hewn men and women who find within themselves a strength they did not know they had. This is what makes them so powerful as symbols. They are not distant heroes in shining armor. They are flawed, loud, stubborn, often reckless, yet they rise to meet chaos with courage. Their example tells us that perfection is not required to stand strong, only the will to act when everything around us threatens to fall apart. In the Riot of Bucksnort, when the town seemed consumed by madness, the figure who remained standing was not a polished leader, but a raw and unrefined survivor. That truth reminds us that anyone, no matter their background, can find greatness in the moment when it is needed most. The Western also reflects the tension between civilization and wilderness, between order and chaos, which mirrors the internal struggle in every human being. Just as the town struggled to maintain a fragile order against the untamed frontier, each of us struggles to maintain our values, our dignity, and our dreams against the storms of fear, anger, and despair that rise within. The riot is not just external but internal, a battle that tests whether we can hold to who we are when forces try to tear us apart. Watching characters in a Western endure their storms gives us a language for understanding our own, reminding us that we are not alone in this struggle, that others before us have faced their riots and emerged with scars, but also with strength. Another reason the Western serves as a mirror of life is that it honors resilience and storytelling. Every fight, every hardship, every scar becomes a story retold in saloons, around campfires, or in the quiet of memory. This is what human beings do with pain. They turn it into tales, and those tales become lessons. The riot in Bucksnort was not just an evening of destruction. It became a memory shared, a story that grew larger with every retelling. shaping the identity of the town and the people who lived there. In the same way, the trials of our lives become the stories we pass on, teaching our children, friends, or even strangers how we endured, how we laughed, and how we survived. At its core, the Western celebrates the spirit that refuses to give in, the stubborn defiance of human beings against overwhelming odds. That spirit is not limited to the 1800s or the dusty roads of Texas towns. It is alive in every person who faces their own riot, whether that riot is loss, failure, betrayal, or the grind of daily struggle. By watching a man like Pike Bearfield refuse to surrender in the midst of chaos, we see a reflection of what we ourselves must do in our own battles. The Western may dress it in boots, revolvers, and saloons, but the heart of the story is timeless. Life will test you. And when it does, you must stand tall, fight through the madness, and emerge with your spirit unbroken. This is why the Western endures, why stories of riots and rough heroes continue to speak across generations. They are not just tales of the past, but parables of survival, courage, and identity. The Riot of Bucksnort is not just about a wild night in a frontier town. It is about the eternal truth that life will bring storms, and in those storms, we must discover our own strength, laugh when we can, and keep moving forward no matter how bruised we become. Ladies and gentlemen, the Riot of Bucksnort is not just a tale of fists, splintered wood, and wild chaos. It is a reminder of what life itself demands of us. The dust, the brawls, the laughter, and the resilience all speak to one truth. Every one of us will face our own riots. Moments when the world spins out of control and tests who we truly are. In those moments, it is not perfection that carries us, but grit, humor, honor, and the courage to stand firm. The Western may wear the face of gunfighters and saloons, but its heart is timeless. It is a mirror showing us that strength rises in struggle, character is revealed in chaos, and humanity endures when we refuse to surrender. The lesson of Bucksnort is clear when life becomes a storm. Let us be the ones who rise, who fight, who laugh, and who walk away scarred but unbroken. Like and subscribe to our channel Dream Chase to watch the next video.